Hey there, welcome to episode 214 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my newest Masters of the Universe Origins figures. So there's 4 figures that I recently acquired. I don't know if they're officially called Wave 9, but I think by my count, that's what I'll call them at least. So Wave 9 consists of 4 figures. I would say they're the newest figures to come out, but Wave 10 has already been released as well. That's another 4 figures. I don't have them yet, but they're currently sitting in my pile of loot with Big Bad Toy Store waiting to be shipped to me. So I'll have another video with Wave 10 very soon. But in the meantime, let's talk about the 4 latest figures in the Origins line. So the first figure in this wave that I want to talk about is Pighead. Now, if you are a kind of a casual Masters of the Universe fan and you don't follow all the news as it comes out, you might be wondering, who the heck is this guy? Is he a brand new character? Is he a character I somehow missed from the original line? And the fact of the matter is he's kind of both of those things, I guess. He was not part of Masters of the Universe lore until very recently. But this figure here is based on an old figure from the 80s. Now, if you watched my video for, I believe it was, I think maybe just the previous wave. So maybe, I can't remember if it was wave 8 or wave 7. But I reviewed this character here, which is Sunman. And this is another character that you might not immediately recognize. I wasn't familiar with either of these characters. I talked about it in his video, so I'm just going to briefly recap now. But back in the 80s, at the height of Masters of the Universe's popularity, there was some mother, I think based out of New York, and she had a small black son, and she wanted to buy him a heroic action figure, and she didn't really like the lack of diversity in the Masters of the Universe line. So she went and created a knockoff line of figures with basically the same build as Masters of the Universe, and the hero of that line was called Sunman. And in that line, I think there were 10 figures in total, and most of the characters were all different minorities. So there was like an Asian character and a Hispanic character and multiple African American characters. And then there was this guy, Pighead, who was the bad guy. So he's kind of the equivalent of Skeletor, I guess, as far as Sunman goes. Now again, I don't know anything about the lore of these guys. I don't know if there was a storyline on the back of the package to kind of flesh things out. Because when I look at this guy, I see him as a henchman. He doesn't look like a Skeletor type that would lead a whole army. But I don't know, maybe all it would take would be to read a comic book or watch an episode of the cartoon, and then I could see this guy in a new light as a leader. But when I glance at him, he looks like just some stupid henchman. Anyway, so I guess in recent years, Mattel had adopted Sunman and all his heroes, his adversaries, into their line. And it's happening for the first time ever in the Origins line. But now they've actually made a new version of Sunman in the Masterverse line, which is the more detailed 6-inch line that they're also currently putting out right now. So Sunman is now well integrated into the Masters of the Universe lore. It remains to be seen whether we'll get a Masterverse version of Pighead, but that may very well be coming soon as well. Now, of the 10 original figures in the Sunman line, Mattel has already revealed 5 of them that are going to be released. So we've got these 2 now. There's another character in Wave 10 that I currently have on pre-order, and there is another one, I believe, in Wave 11, and then there's another one in a box set that's being released. So there's a new version of Sunman and Pighead coming out in a 3-pack, along with Space Sumo, who is another one of the Sunman characters. So yeah, they're going to have this whole line integrated into Masters of the Universe Origins pretty quickly, it seems. I would guess that by the end of 2023, we have all of the Sunman characters. Now, while I think that backstory is all pretty neat, I'm not super thrilled about Sunman. Like, he's okay, but I really don't like this wing accessory that he has around his neck. I think he would have been better served with just a standard cape. Now, mind you, these things, it does pop off quite easily. And while he's just on display on my shelf, I keep him like this. But I think if I was actually a kid and I was playing with these things, I would lose this pretty quickly because I think it's kind of dumb, actually. It doesn't look very cool. Anyway, so Sunman, he's an okay addition to the Masters of the Universe line. But when it comes to Pighead, I think I like him a lot more. For one, I just like creatures and monsters better. And Pighead, where he does just seem like kind of a dumb pig barbarian guy, I think he fits in quite well with Skeletor's evil warriors. Like, I can totally see this guy just marching into battle with Beastman and Merman and Triclops and all those guys. And yeah, like, as far as the sculpt and everything goes, like, he's got a really great head sculpt. He's got all those crazy teeth jutting out of his face there, which looks very uncomfortable. I like his color scheme. Like, it's not a super obvious one. Like, I think if they created this character from scratch now, they probably would have went with, a very different color scheme. But this figure is based off of that vintage Pighead figure. And these are the colors that were chosen for him back then. They're very pastel-y. Like, he looks like he belongs in an Easter basket or something. With these blues and pinks and greens. But it works. And he looks quite different from every other character on my shelf. If they just went with green and black or something, he might just kind of blend in. But yeah, this guy is like a highlighter, just plopped into the middle of my Masters of the Universe shelf. He really kind of draws your eye. And yeah, he's cool. For accessories, see he's got this kind of like spiked bolo weapon, whatever you would call that, I don't know. And he's got his shield, which just clips onto his hand there. Pretty standard stuff. He's got this kind of removable, spiky belt harness piece, which I think is original for him. Like, the head, the harness are definitely original. I think this crotch piece is a new piece. I don't recall seeing that belt on other characters, but I could be wrong about that. Otherwise, I'm going to guess that all the other parts are just reused from other figures. But anyway, yeah, I like him. He's a cool new addition to the Masters of the Universe line. I'm honestly not sure if I'm going to buy all of the other Sunman characters because none of them really interest me that much. Pighead was the only one when I first learned about this line that really interested me. So I did get Sunman, and I do have the guy from Wave 10 on pre-order as well. But will I continue to buy the other 3, 4, 5 guys? I don't know. It's pretty much guaranteed I'm already not going to buy Space Sumo because he comes with Sunman and Pighead, who I already have single carded. So I'm not going to buy a 3-pack with 2 doubles just to get Space Sumo, who doesn't really impress me all that much anyway. But if they do release Space Sumo on his own later, I could see myself picking him up. So anyway, that's Pighead. Pretty cool. So next up, we're going to talk about the hero of the line. This is, of course, HeMan. Now, this is, I think, my 5th, possibly my 6th HeMan in the line. We get the original HeMan, followed by Battle Armor HeMan, and then there was, I think, Battleground HeMan, and then there was Flying Fist HeMan. There's also Prince Adam, that's his alter ego, so you can kind of count that one. And then you can kind of count, there's Anti-Eternia He-Man, and then there's Faker. So there's a whole bunch of He-Mans in my Origins collection in a very short period of time. So I started off as a completist on this line, although I think I'm slowly starting to back out of that because, as I just mentioned, I don't know if I'm going to buy all of the Sunman characters because I just don't have that attachment to the characters. These toys are starting to go up in price. They're still probably the most affordable toy line I collect, but they are going up, and there are a lot of them coming out, so it kind of adds up. So do I really want to waste my money on toys that I don't really care about? There's upcoming versions of He-Man and Skeletor still announced, and I'm kind of starting to wonder, like, how many of these guys do I really need? There was recently a Tila figure that came out, and she came packaged with Zor, the bird, and that was the first package I kind of passed on. I did not pre-order that. Maybe I will eventually if it goes on sale or something. But I'm kind of starting to back away from my completist attitude towards this line. And you might be thinking, well, then why did you buy another He-Man? And it's because I love this He-Man. I think this is a great figure. I just really kind of love everything about him. From the head sculpt to the the armor or the harness that he wears, the belt, the chest armor. You can see here he's got his sword up. It could really use some paint apps on the sword for sure, but I really think this power sword is much more interesting looking than the standard one we're used to. There's his shield, even that's a little bit more detailed with lots more like rivets on it. And then his axe, also very detailed, lots of sculpted detail in there. Again, lacking paint apps, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, I just think this guy's really cool. This is probably my favorite He-Man of the line so far. Not even probably, really, hands down. I really like this He-Man. And so I'll just give you a quick little bit of background on him. So, back in the 80s when I was a little kid, we got the initial He-Man line. And here is my original He-Man from the 80s. Now, he has seen better days. I've lost his harness. I've lost his weapons. His hand is all chewed to hell, courtesy of my little brother, Brian. But anyway, he's still in one piece and everything. The elastic in his legs hasn't broken, although it's pretty loose. But yeah, I'm happy that I still have my vintage He-Man in my collection. Now, following that, we got something called like the New Adventures of He-Man, which was kind of a science fiction version of He-Man, and it never really caught on with anybody. Although the Origins line has recently paid homage to that line as well by giving us the New Adventures version of He-Man in a special box set. Anyway, even though the 90s He-Man didn't really work, in 2002, they relaunched Masters of the Universe with a new cartoon and a new toy line, which most people just kind of refer to as 2000X. It ran from about 2002 to 2004, so you could call it the 2002 line, but in order to encompass, those whole 3 or 4 years that it existed, people just took to calling it 2000X. And I really liked the 2000X line when it came out. This is the 2000X He-Man. So you can see he was quite radically redesigned from the old vintage one. He looked younger. He looked a little hipper. The cartoon was kind of anime influenced. And you can just see with they changed his armor. They gave him all these little embellishments. His sword, you can see he's got that same sword here, except they painted all this detail in here. His sword actually does a thing where it, let me see, the blade splits out like that, and then you get this kind of cool claw effect on the sword, which is really neat. Then he's got the shield and his axe. It can be stored on the back there, and you see the axe has got all that sculpted detail. It's got all the nice red, gold, and green paint, which really bring out all that detail. And I just really loved this version of He-Man. I thought the cartoon was great. I thought the toys were great. And I was really sad to see it go. Anyway, after that, we went on to the Classics line and all that stuff. But I don't need to give you a whole background on all the He-Mans. But anyway, once the Origins line started, this is the first He-Man we got. And this guy here was based on that original figure. So he's got the very simplified harness, very simple axe, simple shield. And this figure was great. A lot of people didn't like this new head sculpt. They wanted something that looked more like that, which we later got, on some of the later release He-Mans. And all those other versions, the Battle Armor, the Prince Adam, those were all based on vintage 80s figures. So this one here, even though it's not labeled as such on the package, they basically just call this figure He-Man. So if you were kind of new to this line, you wouldn't really know his history. But fans know that this is 2000X He-Man. Like you can clearly see how he's been influenced by this figure. Not just in the armor and the details on the axe and the details on the sword, but it's like the hair, just everything about him is just a little bit more dynamic, a little hipper, I think. And some people might not like that, but I like that He-Man got a little hip. Because I'll be honest, when I was a kid, I didn't really care for He-Man all that much. I loved the Masters of the Universe, but He-Man was kind of one of my least favorite characters. I thought when the 2002 series came along, they actually made He-Man one of the cooler characters of the show. And for the first time, I kind of wanted He-Man to be the focal point of the show. And if I was a kid back in 2002, I wasn't. I was in my 20s at that point. But I totally would have wanted to play with He-Man more. He would have shown shined a lot more in my playtime, because as a kid, He-Man was often on the sidelines while Stratos and Buzz-Off did all the heroic stuff. But yeah, I think this version of He-Man is really great, and I really like that they have integrated this version into the Origins line, and they didn't just like forget about it and let it slide away into history. So much so that they've actually, the next He-Man that's coming out is another 2000X era He-Man. It's the Snake Armor He-Man figure, which that's another look that I really liked, and I think it looked really cool on the 2002 figure, and they revisited that look for the Classics line, and I really think it's awesome that we're getting it for the Origins line as well. So I might not buy all the He-Man figures that they keep putting out, but I'm going to at least buy that one. And yeah, if you're wondering if you should get this one, I absolutely give it my my thumbs up. Now, you can't have a 2000X He-Man without a 2000X Skeletor, and that's the next figure we're going to take a look at, is this 2000X inspired Skeletor in the Origins line. Now, like He-Man, they don't label this guy in any particular way other than just calling him Skeletor, so you kind of have to be in the know to understand what this look is based on. So I don't have a vintage 80s Skeletor. My brother Doug had that when we were kids, and I never owned my own version of him. I did have the 2000X Skeletor, and then I had the classic Skeletor. I've got lots of Skeletors in my collection in the meantime. But here is the first Origins version of Skeletor. And like He-Man, the body is very true to the original 80s Skeletor, although they took some artistic license with the head and changed that up. But I quite like this head still. I kind of like the open mouth. He's kind of laughing or something. So yeah, I really like this figure. But as far as the design, with the purple boots and everything like that, this is all very true to the original Skeletor. The power sword as well. So it's got that simple design. You had the gray half and the purple half, and you snap them together to create a full power sword. It doesn't work super great, but that was the idea. And yeah, I like the Skeletor quite a bit. And I've got a whole bunch of other Skeletors since. I've got the Battle Armor Skeletor, I got the Terror Claws Skeletor, the Keldor Skeletor. I think that's it. But regardless, I've got 4 or 5 Skeletors as well. And now we've got this one. And so if you look at them, they're similar, but there's definitely some differences. Like the head design, like this one is a little more cartoony. This one's a little scarier, I guess. The armor, it's very similar as far as like that pattern on his chest and then the crossbones in the center. This guy here, you'll notice he's got his little shoulder armor here is black, which is separate from the purple. It's subtle, but you can see that those are different colors, where here it's clearly all just one color. You know, there's no painted detail on his armor at all. Here we've got the little red gemstone there. His belt is much more detailed here. He's got that kind of like face sculpted in there. And then he's got this like soft, pliable piece that hangs down in front of his crotch, and it comes down farther on the sides of him. Where this one here, it's got a very simple version of that. You can see his belt is very simple. This is very simple. There's nothing on the sides. It's just a straight belt from there. So yeah, so his is much more detailed with all the side bits there. And for his legs, so he's got this really elaborate kind of armor on his shins, but then he's got bare feet, as opposed to Skeletor, who had relatively simple kind of boots, but they covered his whole feet. So those are the differences. And so if I bring in my 2000X Skeletor here, so this was a cool figure. Again, you can see how they went with that scary face. I don't think this new version is quite as scary. They have toned him down a little bit. But you can see all those other elements here. So his shoulder armor, for example, it's black. It's different from the purple. He's got that red jewel in the center of his armor. He's got that belt with all the detail. He's got the longer kind of crotch piece here and the extra little embellishments on the side. He's got the shin armor with the bare feet and his sword, which I forgot to talk about. So he's got a much more elaborate sword. It's still a two-toned sword, and it still comes in 2 parts. So they kind of took the concept from the original 80s toy line about He-Man and Skeletor having 2 halves of a power sword, and they just gave Skeletor a single sword, which broke apart like so, and then you could snap them together to kind of make this dual-bladed kind of weird sword. And, it had nothing to do with He-Man anymore at that point. This was just kind of Skeletor's unique sword. And then, of course, he had his Havoc staff with the skull, the goat skull on the top. So with this figure here, like He-Man, he's got a sword modeled after the 2002 version, but it's much more simplified. Where He-Man's, it didn't split apart and it didn't have all the paint apps. Neither does this one. It doesn't show the two-tonedness of this sword. It's got some of that sculpted detail that matches up. Also, the blade, you can kind of look like how it's got this seam running up, and maybe it's supposed to be two separate blades, but here it's just molded in one piece of plastic, so you don't really get that effect. It looks like a single-bladed sword. But, yeah, he's a cool figure. He's also got his Havoc staff. And, yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about him. I think he looks great. I don't necessarily have the same feelings towards Skeletor that I do for He-Man when it comes to this character. Like, I didn't need this version as much when it comes to Skeletor because I thought Skeletor was always very cool. I liked this version of him. I liked the 80s version of him. But when it came to He-Man, like I said, I wasn't a big fan of the 80s version. I thought he was a little bland, especially surrounded by so many more dynamic characters. But, yeah, since they gave us the He-Man, which I'm really glad they did, of course I want the updated version of Skeletor. And I hope this leads to them doing more characters in the 2000X style because there were some really cool redesigns in the 2000X line for characters like Clawful and Whiplash and even the next character that I'm about to talk about. So why don't we move on to him and say goodbye to Skeletor for now. But again, another thumbs up from me. So the last figure we're going to talk about is Mantenna. And to me, this is the real highlight of the wave. As much as I thought Pighead was cool because he's kind of unique and original, and as much as I really liked the redesign of He-Man, Mantenna is one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters. He always has been. He's right behind Merman. Merman has absolutely got that top slot for me, but I absolutely love Mantenna. I think he was such a cool design. He was so creepy and weird, and I love that original figure of Mantenna, and I'm always thrilled to get new versions of him because it never really feels guaranteed. Like, I feel every time they redo Masters of the Universe, like even in this new Netflix series where everybody's like all cartoony and bulky and weird looking, that He-Man just isn't for me. I haven't watched a single episode of it and I don't care about it. I don't buy any of the toys. However, when they do get around to making Merman in that show, I might buy his action figure just because he's Merman. And that's the thing. I know they will get around to making a Merman. They've actually recently revealed the figure. But I always knew he was coming. If there's a He-Man and a Skeletor, there's going to be a Beastman and there's going to be a Merman. Like, it's just a given. But when it comes to somebody like Mantenna, who's a little bit more obscure, he's a little bit weirder, it's never guaranteed. So I didn't know if we'd get him in the 2000X line. I didn't know if we'd get him in the Classics line. I didn't know if we'd get him in the Origins line. I didn't know if we'd get a Funko Pop of him or a reaction figure. Fortunately, we have in every single one of those instances, so I guess I should probably stop worrying that they're going to stop making Mantennas because they always seem to get to them, even though it might take a while, sometimes a couple years into a line. But sure enough, Mantenna has showed up yet again in the Origins line, and I think it's great. Love this figure. So, where to begin? Let's take a look at this head design. So, what is going on here? As far as I'm concerned, this is his mouth. I have seen some people online say that they always thought that was his nose. It's hard for me to even picture what that looks like. Like if I squint my eyes and it's just like a little Mickey Mouse nose with some whiskers coming out of it. I don't know. It's weird to even think about. As far as I'm concerned, that's his mouth. It's kind of like how I would imagine like the Sarlacc pit, just this kind of gross mouth with all these little teeth on the side or something that would pull you into it, pull food into it. And then he's got these tusks on the side. And then he's these big veiny ears. His eyes are all bulging out of his head. Like, he is just a weird and gross looking character. Then he's got the Horde logo on his chest. The arms with all these kind of little spiky things down the side of his arms. He's got that crossbow that all of the members of the evil Horde They all have a version of this, some sort of variation. And then maybe his most iconic feature is his 4 legs. So you can see these are all articulated. He's got ankle articulation and knee articulation, and they're ball jointed at the top. So he's got lots of movement in these legs. You can do lots with them. And that's just really cool. I really like the construction of this guy. I like how they put him together. I think he looks great. Just super, super cool. And this guy actually has some original play features too. This is another thing I'm really happy to see come back, because in other Masters Universe lines, like the Classics line, for example, they took away a lot of the play features that the original vintage toy line had. So Mantenna, his play feature back in the vintage line was that his eyes would bug out of his head. And you can see clearly he has this big lever on the back of his head. And when you push that, his eyes bug right out of his skull, just to make him extra creepy. Anyway, I absolutely love it. So, for comparison, let me just bring out my original Mantenna figure from my childhood. And this guy was always super freaky looking. If anything, he almost looks even scarier now because the paint rub off on his eyes, they make his eyes look almost even weirder than they were before. But you see with his feature, he's got the lever on his back rather than the back of his head. And one thing he can do that the other guy can't is you could push the lever up and it would stay in place. And so you could display him with his eyes bugging out of his head. You don't have to be touching him. But this guy, he does not have that capability. As soon as you let go of this thing, it kind of slides back into place. So you can only do that when you're actively playing with him. Not a big deal for me. But yeah, I am kind of surprised they didn't give you that feature. One thing that's a plus with the new figure is that the mechanism is in his head. So he has head articulation. Like you can see how he's got a ball joint just like everybody else, so he can look around, he can do a full 360. With this figure here, the mechanism is in his eyes is attached to his back. So for that reason, there's no head articulation, there's no neck swivel. So he can't look up, down, side to side. It always made him feel a little stiff. Now, I guess you could see this as a con on the original figure. I actually kind of liked it. But when I look at this guy, he seems big and buff to me. All the He-Man figures are always big and buff. But where's, like if I bring out He-Man here again for a sec from the 80s, like he's obviously a big buff dude. But his legs compared to Mantenna's legs, Mantenna's just seemed really thick. And it made him seem like even tougher. Like he could pick up He-Man and just body slam him with those big thick legs. But as you can see, he has 4 legs. That was always the intent here. So he's got like 2 separate feet on each side, and there's this clear seam running between his legs. So he was supposed to have 4 legs. That's how he was depicted in the cartoon. But I think just to save money on the engineering of that, they just sculpted him with his 2 legs on either side, just kind of welded together. So yeah, it made him look big and buff, but in actuality, he has 4 scrawny little legs. And I always thought, you know what, I'm kind of glad they sculpted him this way, because I thought he would have looked weird if they separated these skinny little legs. But as you can see, what they've done here is they've separated them, but they also bulked up each leg. So he doesn't have these scrawny little spider legs. They're actually like human size, like normal proportionate legs anyway. So even if you broke off the back half of the legs, I still think he looks fine with just the first 2 legs. They don't look small and weird. So I think that's a really great look for him. I like it a lot. And now, let me see. Even though this guy is based on just the vintage figure, this is kind of all I really need to show you. But just because Mantenna is one of my favorites, I'm going to haul out some of my other Mantenna figures for comparison. So I have this figure here from, I think this was from Super 7. This is the Mantenna as he appeared in the cartoon, which, as you can see, not nearly as cool, at least in my mind. He was kind of a little goofball. He was a wimp, and I didn't care for him. If this was the only version of Mantenna that I knew, he wouldn't be anywhere close to being one of my favorite characters. It was really based on this toy that I really came to like the character so much, because I just think it's really cool looking. Now, in 2002, he didn't actually get an action figure, but he got this, what they call a staction figure. So it is a statue that is unarticulated, but it's in the same scale as the 2002 figures. So if I bring, just like say Skeletor back here for a sec, you could pose these guys together and it still works great. They're in scale, but yeah, no articulation on this guy. But I really liked this crazy radical redesign. You can see how this confirms that this is a mouth, it is not a nose. And it's kind of sculpted how I always imagined it to be, with this really gross mouth with the tusks on the side. You would not want to get bitten by this guy. And yeah, just a really cool redesign. And then in the classics line, they kind of gave us the best of both worlds, is that this figure is strongly based off the 2002 design, but yeah, at least now he's articulated. He doesn't have the eye feature in this one. What you had to do for this one is you could take out his eyeballs, and then they came with separate eyes that you could plug in to make them look like they were extended. But anyway, as much as I love this redesign, and this is what I'm talking about with, I hope that down the line in the Origins line of figures, they give us another Mantenna based on this look, because I think that would look really cool. But this one here, as you can see, it's based on the vintage 80s line, and I think it looks great. They did a really good job of recreating him. And I was curious if when they did Mantenna, if they were going to go this route and give him the stuck together legs just to be faithful to the vintage figure. And I'm really glad to see that they decided to change things up and actually give him his 4 legs. I think it's awesome. I really love this figure. Definitely the highlight of this wave, and probably, I don't know, one of the best they've released to date, I think. So yeah, super, super cool. So that was my review of Masters of the Universe Origins Wave 9. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave me comments below, which are always appreciated. So I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, ciao.